Hey everybody, this is Mark from Circle of the Dark Mother. We did a ritual room um, demo and explanation last night on our meeting, and it didn't record. So I thought I would do a rerun of it and go through the tour of the ritual room, my altars, and why I use what I use. I want to start out by saying that this is the way I do it, and this is with a particular method and a particular purpose, but that doesn't mean you have to do it this way. This is just the way I do it. I come about everything from a Gnostic Kabbalah sort of point of view. I would say I do Gnostic Kabbalah from a pagan perspective. So that's the paradigm I work in, but that doesn't mean you have to do it this way. This is just some ideas, not dogma. So take what works and get rid of what doesn't. So what I'm going to do is take you through each of my altars. I'm going to take you through each of the ritual items, the statues, explain why I've set it up the way I have, and then, again, take it where you want. This is just one way of doing things. I also wanted to comment that, you don't have to have as an elaborate a setup as I do. Most of these items have been acquired over years of collecting. So it's been a long time of me searching out these items and getting them. You can start with very, very simple items. And we did have a question yesterday about what if you live in a small space? One of the things I've seen people do is get a box and put small items in it for their ritual items so they can store it away and don't have to have dedicated space. So again, none of this is necessary. It is the way I work. And because we do open rituals, I have a more elaborate setup. So I'm going to take you through, I have 7 altars in this room, and I'll explain why and what each of them mean. So we're going to start with this first altar, which is my central altar. This is on the south wall. And now I picked south for 2 reasons. One reason is because literally this is the best wall to have a main altar. It is the largest wall in the room and has the most space, but also because south is in Kabbalah is protection. And I figured that protection is one of the main things I work with, not necessarily protection for myself, but protection for others. So protection is a good place to be. This altar, which 4 of mine are dedicated to Lilith in different aspects. I am a Lilith devotee. You could use another deity, male or female, in the south. But the south in Kabbalah stands for fire. It stands for protection. It is a masculine sign, but then again, that doesn't mean you need to use a masculine deity. It is also fire red, and it is also merciful. Mercy in Kabbalah is abundance, where severity is restriction. So when you hear me say mercy, it means that it is abundant energy, not focused. In Kabbalah, mercy and severity, neither one are good or bad. We need both. And you don't want to get too polarized one way or the other, because then you get out of balance. Compassion is the balance of mercy and severity. So first of all, on this altar to the left, I have a dark Lilith. And left in Kabbalah is severity. So I'm using a darker version of her, one that's a little more restrictive. And then to the right, I'm using the bright Lilith because this side is mercy. The statue in the center then stands for compassion and is basically the placeholder for the balance. Now, all of my altars, as I said, are set up based on Kabbalistic ritual techniques. And so what that means is I do them in a very specific way. Again, you don't have to do it that way, but this is the general setup of what I do. First, every one of my altars has an earth element, a pentacle. Now it can either be a traditional pentacle or any kind of flat, round object. In this case, I'm using a very large agate as the pentacle. Pentacles are green. Now, they don't have to be colored green, but the color that's associated is green. Earth, severity, feminine, and magic. The next item then is a wand. Wands are merciful, they are masculine, they are fiery. The color that's associated is red, and they are about protection. In this case, I have a quartz wand. Doesn't have to be quartz. It can be, and you'll see I have all kinds of different types, but it could be stone, it could be quartz, it could be a different element, it could be wood, whatever is sort of pointy can be used as a wand. And I know in some traditions, the attributes of the wand and the attributes of the knife are reversed. But in the Kabbalistic tradition I use, the wand is fire. So I move on then to my knife. And the knife can be an athame or a porba. This is a porba, which is a Buddhist knife, which has 3 sides. In this case, I'm using a crystal one because it goes with this set. But again, you can use a metal knife or anything that has a blade. The knife in this tradition is masculine. It is severe because it cuts, it points in a very specific way. It is also, it is yellow, and it is associated with air. The next object then is a cup. The cup is feminine, merciful. It is color blue. It is associated with prophecy. And it is feminine. I don't know if I said that. So you'll notice that in this layout, there are 2 objects. One is compassionate, one is merciful. One is masculine, one is feminine. And then on this side, again, we have one that's severe and one that's merciful. One masculine, one feminine. There is then another object on the altar, in the altar type that I do, which is a sphere, usually crystal, usually quartz, but not always. The sphere sets up the whole compassion thing. The sphere is not male or female, it is androgynous and both. It is compassion, and it is spirit space instead of the 4 directions and the 4 elements. So this is another part of the altar that you will always see on my altar, but take a different form. On this altar, there are other objects like candles, a black mirror, various types of things, offering bowls and such, incense. And you'll also notice that I have a crystal skull. This is a quartz crystal skull about the size of a normal human skull. We use this specifically to represent enlightenment and represent our spirit. You don't have to have a skull in this paradigm, and you don't have to have anything except for the 5 major elements, usually with a deity statue and a couple candles. But this is how I chose to do this. With the south, there is an archangel associated with it. As I said, I do Kabbalah. I don't do it from a Judeo-Christian standpoint, but angels are a part of it. So in the south, the archangel is Michael or Michael. He is the archangel of protection. He is masculine. His color is red. And he is merciful, which sounds really weird because you think of him with a knife or a sword. But the thing of Michael is that he does not use his sword unless he has to. So he is merciful. You'll notice I have another angel picture up, and this doesn't go for the south. This actually goes to the right, to the altar over there, which is to the west. This is Gabriel, same as Gabriel, except for I'm using the Hebrew pronunciation of Gabriel. Gabriel is feminine. Gabriel, the color is blue. The direction is west. The element is water. Gabriel is also merciful. Gabriel, as I said, being feminine, even though the symbology is usually somewhere between masculine and feminine, but Gabriel is a feminine entity in Kabbalah. And Gabriel is pointing, as I said, to the next altar to the west. So I'm going to go over to the west. As we go there, I'm going to show you, I don't know if you can see because of the light, but in my windows, I have stained glass, a C in this window, and an M in this window for Circle of the Mother. Our group is Circle of the Dark Mother, but I have those too. We also have this altar then. So this is my altar to the west. This isn't big enough for me to have one of the angel pictures, so I just have a Lilith painting done by an amazing artist named Misty Wood. This painting is the cover of my book, Embracing Lilith. You'll notice I have a couple of Lilith-y things on the wall. And then I have this particular altar. This altar, where the one to the south is using Lilith as sort of her supernal mode, her mode of both light and dark at once. I'm using her there as sort of the eternal Lilith. In this case, this altar to the west is dedicated to Lilith as Lilit. Lilit is how in Hebrew her name is spelled. It's Lamed Yod Tav, and can be pronounced Lilit. Lilit is sort of the younger version of Lilith, the more seductress, the first wife of Adam and the mate of all the demonic entities. So this altar is dedicated to her in that form, partly because the West is not only prophecy, but it's also the gate of death. So I use the more harsh version of her. To the right, I have a very popular image of her that comes from a painting originally that is in statue form. It's her with the serpent wrapped around her. On top of the altar, I have a statue that's actually called Eve, which shows a female figure with the serpent and an apple, or a fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. In this case, I use it as a Lilith because it's very Lilithy. And you will see I do that. I use statues how I see them, not necessarily how they were intended. On the left, then, we have a statue that is entitled Lilith and Lucifer. I don't use it as Lilith and Lucifer, and I'll explain why. In Hebrewic lore, Lilith is actually partnered with the demonic force Samael. Samael is the poison of God and also the antidote. Much like Lilith, he is a tempter that tempts us into seeing where we need to change. Later on in Kabbalistic lore, Lilith the younger, or more Lilith, pairs up then with Ashmedai, who is the head of the Shaddim. They are demons of admixture, and they're the demons used by King Solomon to build the temple. Lucifer was actually a Greco-Roman deity that was later named as a fallen angel and associated with the Satan. Satan is actually a title, not a name. It means accuser. So any of these beings can be a Satan if they're an accusing force. So around the Middle Ages is when Lucifer got tied to Lilith. It's a more modern adaptation and totally valid, but I use this statue as Samael because that's more in line with what I do. Again, however it works for you. You'll notice on this altar that I have, again, a wand. This wand is bone and crystal. I have a pentacle, which is a mirror, a black mirror made out of obsidian. I have an athame, a cup, and a sphere. I also have some candles and a crystal and some other stuff. You notice that it's the same layout, but it's different types of elements. And that's because anything works. It's really what you're going for. I pair these elements up to the aspect of deity that I'm working with. So these particular ones, to me, feel more Lilith, where the ones on the main altar are more Lilith. I'm now going to go to the east and show you the altar there. So this altar is an altar in the east. And in this aspect, I use Lilith as Ne'ama. Ne'ama is sometimes in literature called a demon. She is sometimes considered Lilith's sister or daughter, but I see her as Lilith in physical incarnation. Ne'ama is said to have been the sister of Tubal-Cain, a descendant of Cain. She is also said to have been extremely beautiful in life, a seductress. And in some literature, I think it's in Islamic literature, she is the wife of Noah. So she's a very, very interesting figure with lots of mythology. She also can be associated with Belquis, the Queen of Sheba that is mentioned with King Solomon. So there's an association there. These three statues are not actually spiritual statues. They are from a thing called Court of the Dead, which has its own comic adaptation. I am not using them as those figures. I don't know anything about that other than I got the statues, but they very much represent Neama to me. And the way is, again, to the right, we have this figure of her that's very beautiful, a seductress, very earthy. And that is one of the aspects I see her in. And I've never found a really beautiful Neama-ish figure, and this fits. I have another figure that I'm using as Neama too, that I got off of Etsy, which is right next to her. To the left, where I go to severity, I have a couple of darker ones. Again, a sketch from Court of the Dead. This one is more of a Lamia character, where her body is snake-like, where her torso and head is human. That is also one of the aspects that commonly Neama takes on. In fact, she's syncretized sometimes with Lamia from Greek literature, sometimes also Medusa. So this is a good representation of her in her more sort of animalistic form. And then again, an Etsy find, this coppery Lilith, which is holding a human heart. And again, I'm using this as Neama. The center one is an Egyptian-looking woman who again, from Court of the Dead, that rules over death. And again, this is very Neama-ish. In fact, she is sometimes pictured as an Egyptian queen. So that's another great reason to use this statue. So as I said, I use statues sometimes that don't actually represent what I represent them as. If I consecrate them to the deity and I use them that way, that's what they become. You'll notice also there's another picture behind here. This is another piece of artwork by Misty Wood. It's a one that's called Lilith with Fire Snake. But I use it as Neama because usually when I see Lilith, her eyes are green, sometimes black. But Neama comes to me sometimes with green eyes, sometimes with red eyes. And this painting just has a very Neama look to me. So I've used that. You'll notice again, I have a wand. This one is black obsidian. I have a pentacle, much more like what you're used to with a sphere. I have a goddess Athame, and then I have a cup. This cup is actually a Kapala. Kapala is a Buddhist skull cap. And what happens is when a Buddhist monk dies, they will sometimes dedicate their body to create artifacts. And what they will do is cut the skull cap off and turn it into a cup to be drank out of for ritual to symbolize enlightenment. Now, this one is not actually a skull cup. It is made from ground bones of a Buddhist monk forged into a skull cap. The reason being it's hard and expensive to get the actual skull caps, because obviously every body only has one. But when the monk dedicates their body, all the other bones are used as well. And so they can form kapalas and such out of it. So not quite as powerful, but at the same time, pretty intense, right? I do have some other things on this altar, like some selenite. I have this black flame, smoky quartz crystal. I also have a small box that's a casket because she does have this life and death quality. The reason I put her, that I put Neama specifically in the East is air, it is severe, it is also associated with life, where and healing. And I found Neama to be, even though she can be very harsh, she's very healing. She works good with relationships, although if the relationship is not good for you, she will make it crash and burn quickly. But if it is good for you, she will tend to it. She will also do a lot with healing the body and the soul. And since this is life versus West is death, I decided to use this more earthly version of Lilith as Neama. There is an archangel painting for this. So the archangel associated with that is Raphael, the archangel of healing. Again, yellow, air, masculine, and severe. And he is associated with, to the right, East. I do have this other painting done by Misty, a full, almost full-size painting of Guadalupe with the Day of the Dead artwork on her. And this is a really good mix of this idea of the dark goddess being a mix of bright and dark. Very Lilithian, even though it's Guadalupe. She has a couple skulls at the bottom. So this is in my ritual room as well. The next altar to travel to is in the north. And this altar is fairly large because of all that's on it. So the altar to the north is based in the north, has to do with the color green. It has to do with earth. It has to do with magic. It is severe and it is feminine. So this altar, I actually use Lilith in all of her forms that are not from the Jewish texts or any of the Gnostic texts. I use her more ancient Babylonian roots and the synchronizations to some other goddesses. So I'll move a little closer. I wanted to give you the big picture. And before I do that, the archangel here is Uriel. Uriel is the archangel of the north, magic, green, feminine, and also severe. So once I come over to this altar, the main piece in the middle is actually from a game called Diablo. It's a version of Lilith. In the statue actually comes with a demon skull in her hands. I took that out because it really wasn't applicable, but I put these beads in her hands. The reason I use this is Lilith is syncretized in Babylonian lore with many other deities. She's synchronized with a couple of different entities that have Lilith or Lilit or Lilitu in the name. Her main name is Lilitu in Babylonian and Sumerian texts, but she's synchronized with one goddess named Lamashtu. Lamashtu is a different entity, but she is very dark and bestial. And Lilith later took some of those attributes. So I'm using her in that darker form here. This is all about magic, this altar, and it's also about definitely using the darker side. I'm not saying evil. I don't use evil. I don't do curses, but this is definitely the harsher. I have a couple more statues. I have the very Sumerian Lilith, the one in the back, and then I have a statue that's actually of Nyx, the Greek goddess of the night. Lilith was syncretized to her at some points, and I just think it's a very Lilithy statue, so I use it. On this side, I then have another copy of the Sumerian Lilith, and then I have one that's titled Inanna, which is also a name for Ishtar. Ishtar is also a Mesopotamian goddess, has very similar iconography, and in fact, Lilith is sometimes said to be her handmaiden. I use this statue because it is very Lilithy. The big difference is that it has lions under her, but the lions are standing on owls, and Lilith is associated with owls where Ishtar is lions. She does have bird feet, which Ishtar sometimes does, but that's more Lilith. So again, this statue is, who knows exactly who it is, but I use it as Lilith. I name all of the ones on this altar Lilith too, since they resonate with the Sumerian texts. I do have the same ritual stuff. I have a wand that is wood with a citrine, and it is two snakes wrapped around each other. I have a pentacle, which is Lilith's symbol, with a sphere. I also have a knife, a very large Egyptian-looking knife with two pieces, and I have a cup, just like everywhere else. I've also put on this altar candles and flowers because there's this big thing about the dark side of Lilith. There's this play on in nature that nature is really the play of beauty and horror. That's talked about in Kabbalah quite a bit. And the mother is this same play. And what that means is you think about how beautiful our world is, but when a natural disaster happens or a predator takes down prey, there's great horror for those who are affected, but it's still part of the mother's play. And so that's why I have roses to give the idea of the beauty and the horror. I also have from some very red-based crystals, so that, you get the whole blood and fire idea. And I actually have a couple of glass eyes on this one because Lilith is all seeing. So that is the fourth altar. There are three more, and I'll explain what they are and why here in a minute. I do want to take an interlude and show a couple other things. I do have some other things on this altar, like under this altar, like a cup and some boxes, crystals. This is really cool. I got this on Etsy. You can barely see it, but it's a Ouija board that's a box, and it's got Lilith as the symbology on it. So a lot of other stuff. I also have a whole cabinet of different deities. We have Egyptian, Black Madonnas, Mary Magdalene, Native American, a Hecate in there, Kuan Yin. We have some Christian mother iconography, Santa Morte again. I have Medusa and Ereshkigal, Sophia, Babylon, Moses, and also Sekhmet. Sekhmet's up here, sorry. Down here I have Shiva, which is the tree-like one, where she is an Assyrian goddess who was later brought into Jewish tradition as the mother. And I also have a Baphomet in there. And then on the bottom, I have European goddesses and gods, mostly Celtic. Some of them are Welsh. My ancestor is Welsh. But I also have Hel from Norse tradition, Morrigan from the Irish tradition, and so on. So I mentioned that I have 7 altars, and the question is why? Well, first of all, you don't need to have 7 altars. You don't even need to have more than one, and it doesn't have to be as elaborate. But in the tradition I do, I work with a sphere when I open my magic. So I know some traditions like Wicca open a circle, which is totally fine. Some traditions don't even do that. They use a world tree. Norse tradition does that. Some of the Druid traditions do that. So that is another way to open your magic. You can do it any way that works for you and any tradition you've come from. But I use the Gnostic Kabbalah tradition of opening an entire sphere. And there are 7 directions. So we have, south, and we have north, and we have east, and we have west. But we also have down, up, and center. So instead of Lilith, I use different entities for those 3. I use Lilith as the sort of the circle, and then the spine of it is different deities. This altar is in the east under Neama. This altar is for down. Down is like the sphere. It's about spirit space, and it's also about all of the physical and darker planes. This altar is focused on entities called Pombagira and Eshu. These are from the tradition called Kimbanda. Kimbanda is a Brazilian tradition that is a mix of native Brazilian, African, ritual magic, and Kabbalah. Back when Kimbanda was started, it was at a time where the Catholic Church was really trying to root out heretics. And we know that a lot of the Latin American traditions, when the church came and said, oh, you're worshiping demons, they said, no. Our entities are angels, or they, like in some traditions, they take the Loa and syncretize them to saints. So the church gets off their back. Well, Kimbanda took a different track. The church said, you're worshiping devils. And they said, yep, we are. That's cool. So they really name theirs in very dark ways and use very dark and anti-society iconography. You notice that many of them are not dressed with many clothes. There's a lot of garish colors. That is on purpose. They really use it as a way to sort of knock your consciousness out of tradition. In some forms of Kimbanda, Lilith is said to be the goddess or queen of the Pombagira, and Neama is their mother. So these fit in very well. The Pampajura being the female entities. Pampajura means whirling dove and is very much like the spirit that is sort of chaotic. The Eshus are named after, probably named after a god form from Africa. I use these, I do use them as Pampajura and Eshu, but I use them as children of Lilith. In a lot of the rabbinic lore, Lilith has children called Lilin and Lilu. The Lilin are her daughters created from her mating with men. And then the Lilu are her sons that are produced from her mating with demons. I don't take these as evil entities at all. In fact, the Pampajura and the Eshu really are more like protector spirits. They help people, they guide people through dream. And so this is why I use them as down. I use them as the physical darker manifestation. And if you want to know more about Kimbanda, there's some really good books I can recommend. So if you have any questions, shoot me an email or Facebook, and I can get you some information on that. And in fact, I can get you information on a number of the topics that I've covered. This altar does have still a wand, a knife, a cup, a pentacle, and a sphere. Now you'll notice that I used rose quartz for a lot of this. And that's because pink is very big with the Pampajura. Pink and red are big with both of them. Again, garish colors. So I used rose quartz because it seemed to fit really, really well. So there's a lot of rose quartz on this. In addition, I do have a bunch of Indian-based statues, both Hindu and Jain, that are in this part of the cabinet. They're not segregated for any particular reason other than they fit there. So that's where they're at. I'm going to take you over to my altar for up, which I will not call really ideal. I need to work on a better solution for this because it's under Lilith. It really should be up high, but I don't have a place yet. I just moved into this house about a month ago. So for up, I use Hecate. And the reason I use Hecate for up is the heavens, not the way Christians talk about heaven, because there's actually 7 in Kabbalah, and none of them are the end of your journey. They're just places of transformation. And up is also beyond creation. It is beyond everything. In Kabbalah, once you pass out of the tree of life, you end up in a place that is the primordial void, that is no thing, not nothing, but nothing like you could ever understand. In some traditions, Hecate is considered the black dragon of the void, the first creative force, the mother of everything. So I use her as up because I see her as that beyond. She works, I know some people say they don't work, that they cannot get her to work well with Lilith. She works extremely well for me with Lilith. I put them, for me, not saying it'll work for you because it's about your consciousness, but for me, I put her in this place of beyond, and Lilith is sort of my more imminent version of what I deal with. So I don't work with Hecate directly, but I do invoke her in my spheres, and she is a stabilizing force. So I have 2 different versions of Hecate here. One on the right of her more merciful form, more of a priestess, and then the darker, more harsh version on the left with a picture of her in the middle. Her symbology is usually a key and a flame. The key is her being able to take you through gateways, being able to take you through realities. And the flame is to give you enlightenment and help you on your journey. Now, again, I have a knife, I have a wand, I have a spear, I have a pentacle, and I have a cup. They're in a little different configuration, but they're all there. I chose to use amethyst for her because purple seemed like a really good color for this. Her color is usually green, which you notice the cup, but purple seemed really good for this void beyond. It's not clear and it's dark, but it's still very luminous. And then I have a Welsh dragon pin in the middle because, again, the dragon of the void. So, and the symbol is her symbol, the strobolos, that's under the one amethyst. Again, so I use her for up. And then lastly, the last direction is, oh, and I should mention archangels. I don't have paintings of them. There really aren't any good ones. But down, the archangel is Sambofan, the archangel of the mother, feminine, um, and merciful, and very much associated with spirit space. But that angel is supposed to walk with us. Up, the archangel is Metatron, the archangel of all enlightened beings, severe, but again, spirit space, and a being of immense power, way beyond anything we can really understand. So I will now take you to my last altar, which is a small altar for inside. And let me speak about the inside one. Inside is usually an enlightened being, like Buddha would fit in the inside place very well. I very often use Mary Magdalene as a statue in this place. And the reason being is because she, in Gnostic tradition, is an enlightened being that's equal to or above even Yeshua, who Christians call the Christ. And don't take this as a Christian term. It's about this enlightened being. So in this case, though, I'm using Saint Cyprian. He's not a deity. He was theoretically a historical figure. Now, can we prove he actually existed? There are texts that talk about him. And there are actually two Saint Cyprians. One was a bishop that was part of the Catholic Church. And then there's another one that was called Cyprian the Mage. He was a sorcerer. He lived in the Middle East and was said to be, so in more Christian times after the Middle Ages, they say that he was basically a satanic sorcerer who then got converted to Christianity because he fell in love with a woman he couldn't dominate with his magic, and that he became this figure that stood on both shores, one in the dark side and one on the light. Now, when you actually read the information about him, he was way pre-Christian in his beginnings. So he really wasn't doing satanic magic. He was doing working with daemons. He was probably working with Middle Eastern and Greco-Roman deities. He has a place that he lived that was on top of a Hecate temple. But the reason I use him is he's very much this figure that stands between the light and dark. And that's what the center is about. Center is about enlightenment. It is compassion, it is spirit, and that place is in our heart. It is our heart chakra. So he is a really good figure to use there. I've used Magdalene or other beings like that more often. Persephone might be a good one. But I chose him because I don't work with male deities or spirits very often. And he really resonated with me. So I've decided to work with him at this time. Again, you can use anybody for any of these, but this is who I'm using right now. He does have a wand, a knife, a cup, a little pentacle type thing, some crystals and candles and such. The archangel of center is Hua. Hua is, in Hebrew, means he, she, and is the archangel basically that is over all of our enlightenment. So that's why I work with them. When I did the class yesterday, or the session yesterday, I got asked, well, what if you don't resonate with Christianity or Judaism? Well, first, I don't really work in Christianity or Judaism. I am using figures that are known in those traditions, like the archangels, but they are really more ancient than Christianity. These forces are energies, spirit energies, mostly of order. They are mostly merciful entities, although they can be very harsh, but they are of abundance. I work with them because I work with so many dark goddess figures that there's a good balance of working with the two. In my belief, Lilith can control all the angels and the demons, anything of severity or mercy, and anything in between, because she is the Dark Mother. She is the mother of everything. So I do use angels. I do use like Cyprian. But what I would say is if you do not resonate with angels, don't use them. As I said at the beginning of this is not telling you what you have to do. You don't have to set your altars up like this. You don't have to use the same iconography. You don't have to work with Lilith or any of the figures I've worked with. and you can do it completely different. What I was trying to show is how I work based on my past and what I've learned and how it works for my consciousness. You need to work with what works for your consciousness. So it's really interesting to try to mix some things together and understand how the energies can flow. And since Kabbalah is sort of my file system for how I do spirituality, I use the paradigms of the directions, the 7 directions. I use the paradigms of mercy, severity, and compassion. I use the paradigms of the left being severity and the right being mercy. I use all of that because that's what works for me. You use what works for you. If you have any questions, again, you can email me, hit me up on Facebook. I also, as some of you know, wrote the book Embracing Lilith, which has a bunch of information about her. There's a myth in it about basically taking all of the myths and bringing them together in one story. And then it talks about how to work with her. I do talk about the altar setup in there and each of the elements. But again, don't feel like you have to buy the book, just a thing if it's something you're interested in. If you're more interested in Kabbalah, there is a really good book called The Witch's Kabbalah, which is from a place of a woman who grew up in paganism, but also grew up learning Kabbalah. So it's a very good non-Judeo-Christian way of looking at it, and will give you a lot of information. And there's so many books I could go on and on, but that's a good start. So I'm going to close this out. Thank you for watching. And we'll be having our meetings every first Sunday of the month, except for January, we don't do one. And I will be posting those or something if they don't work, like it didn't last night. I'll be posting that each month. Thank you. Take care.